A respected observatory in Cambridge found itself confronting a possibility science had spent generations quietly dismissing. Somewhere beyond Earth, something appeared to be transmitting a signal so precise, so mechanically perfect, that for a brief moment, humanity had to consider the unthinkable. Not because anyone wanted to believe in alien technology, because the evidence arriving on paper refused to behave like nature. It began with paper. Miles of it. Inside the radio astronomy fields at University of Cambridge, long pale sheets continuously spilled from a chart recorder connected to an enormous radio telescope. Day after day, the machine translated invisible radio waves from deep space into ink markings. Most of it looked chaotic. Random spikes, irregular noise, exactly what astronomers expected the universe to sound like. Then, one morning in 1967, a graduate student named Jocelyn Bell Burnell noticed something strange. A tiny patch of what she later called scruff. Buried inside endless rolls of paper, a razor-thin spike had appeared where nothing should have been. Then it appeared again. And again. Exactly 1.33 seconds apart. At first, this looked like an equipment problem. It had to be. Radio astronomy at the time constantly battled interference. Passing cars, television broadcasts, radar stations, faulty cables, electrical contamination from nearly anything on Earth could ruin observations. But the recorder kept printing the same pattern. Perfect spacing. No drift. No variation. The paper itself became the first warning sign. Those endless pale rolls spilling across the observatory floor no longer represented random cosmic noise. Now they looked like something counting. And that changed the situation immediately. Because the strongest assumption inside radio astronomy was simple. Natural radio emissions are messy. Chaotic stars flare unpredictably. Galaxies emit broad, irregular noise. Gas clouds distort signals randomly across huge distances. Nature does not build clocks. But this signal behaved exactly like one. The first explanation worked, until one detail refused to fit. The team began checking for terrestrial interference. They suspected nearby electronics, aircraft communication systems, radar contamination, internal hardware malfunction. Nothing matched. Then they ran a second test. As Earth rotated through space, the signal disappeared from the telescope's view for several hours. Then returned at exactly the same position in the sky. That changed everything. If the source moved with Earth, it was local interference. If it stayed fixed relative to the stars, the source existed somewhere far beyond the atmosphere. The signal stayed fixed. Now the chart recorder meant something worse. Those mathematically perfect spikes were not coming from Cambridge. They were coming from space itself. And suddenly, the safest explanation was gone. Inside the observatory, discussion shifted into dangerous territory. Not public discussion. Private discussion. Because if a deep space source was intentionally transmitting a perfectly repeating signal, science faced an uncomfortable possibility. Artificial origin. Something intelligent. Something engineered. The team gave the signal a temporary label. LGM. Little Green Men. It sounded like a joke. It was not entirely a joke, because there was a serious procedural problem emerging behind closed doors. Scientific credibility. If researchers announced potential extraterrestrial contact and later discovered a calibration error, careers could collapse instantly. The embarrassment would spread far beyond Cambridge. Worse, uncontrolled media attention could ignite global panic around a claim nobody had verified. So they stayed silent. Meanwhile, the paper kept printing. Long white sheets rolled endlessly from the recorder. Spike. Pause. Spike. Pause. Every 1.33 seconds. Perfectly. And now the story had grown larger than a strange signal. Because astronomy itself was beginning to lose a trusted assumption. For decades, radio telescopes worked because scientists believed nature behaved irregularly. Pattern recognition depended on separating artificial signals from chaotic cosmic emissions. But this object violated that boundary completely. Something natural was behaving like technology. That meant one of science's oldest filtering systems was suddenly unreliable. Then came another disturbing observation. The signal was accelerating. Not in movement, in frequency. Tiny variations began appearing in the pulse timing. At first, this looked terrifying. If intelligence controlled the transmission, perhaps something was deliberately changing the pattern. But further calculations revealed something stranger. The source itself was rotating at incredible speed. A star roughly the size of a city, spinning dozens of times per minute. And suddenly, the entire meaning of the paper changed again. Those neat ink spikes were no longer evidence of intelligence. They were evidence of violence. The object producing them was a neutron star. The collapsed dead core of a massive exploded sun. Its magnetic poles were sweeping concentrated radio beams across space like a lighthouse. Each rotation produced one pulse, and Earth happened to sit directly inside the beam path. The repeating signal that briefly triggered humanity's closest brush with believing it had intercepted alien technology was entirely natural. But that conclusion came with its own consequence. Astronomy had learned something deeply uncomfortable. Nature itself could imitate machines perfectly. The old assumption was broken. The chart recorder, sitting quietly inside Cambridge, had exposed a dangerous weakness in scientific thinking. Not because scientists misunderstood aliens, because they misunderstood nature. Those endless sheets of pale paper never changed. The spikes remained exactly where they had always been. But their meaning transformed 4 separate times. Noise. Malfunction. Alien transmission. Dead star. And that was the real discovery. For a brief moment, humanity stopped trusting its own definition of the universe. Nature learned how to fake intelligence, and science was not ready. The paper knew first.